good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to part 4. I'm SKippy. Part 4 of the Guillow Spitfire conversion to a T.IX Spitfire two-seater. If you've seen the other videos, I'm now up to the stage where I've pretty much built the airframe. I just now need to do the motor mount, so I'll do that in this video. I need to finish off the fuselage, do the covering, and then my favourite bit of painting it. Also need to install the electrics. So that's what I'm getting off to now. Okay, building the motor mount. I'm going to fix it onto here. This is the shim that I put on because I realised when I'd built it, it wasn't level when it was stood upright. I'm going to be using the heat shield that came with the kit to form the base of the motor mount. I'm then going to be using a Lego again. This time I had to get permission from my son because he wasn't very happy that I used it last time. So 2 Lego blocks to make the mount. I'll then use another bit of this vinyl on top and screw the motor to it. Then I will epoxy it onto the model and all should be good. I'll then make sure that it all fits in neatly into that space. Had to file down with inside it so that I can get the battery to sit a bit neater, and I've decided that I'll be putting the receiver so that the wires are at this end, so that there's more space within the fuselage for the ESC and the battery once they're in there. To make the motor mount, I've used the firewall that came with the kit. I used the the bolt positions that would have got used for the small motors to find the centre. I've then drilled that out and made it big enough to cater for the fact that on the bottom of this motor there's a split ring. So as it spins, it has to have a hole big enough that that fits through. I've then done another hole here, which lines up with the larger bolt holes on the motor. I'm not attaching the motor to this piece, but it's so that I can line it up. And then these marks here are where I'm going to put the actual motor mount itself onto this firewall. This is what I'm going to mount the motor to. So the 2 big holes line up with the 2 big holes on the motor. The hole in the centre there is to match or to go through, so when it spins it doesn't catch that clip. And the other 2 holes are just so that I could line it up. And then the markings is where I'm going to attach this to the mount itself. Again, I'm using Lego. Out of interest, on all my kits it seems to be 2 blocks and a flat piece are good enough. I'm doing it slightly differently this time, and I've made a U-shaped block. My son's happy because this isn't his favourite Lego and it's bog standard red. And I know for a fact that when you add that and that on top, along with the motor, and put the cowling over the top, the motor will be sticking out just enough clearance so that when you put the washer with the spinner, it all fits up nicely. So what I'm now going to do is glue the Lego onto this piece, and those bits there go on here. I'm going to glue the whole piece onto the base, and that's where they go. And then I can attach the motor because the holes here are big enough and line up like that. And then I can use the long Allen key that came with the kit to tighten the bolts onto the bottom of the motor itself, so I don't have to have the motor fitted. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. So there we go, motor mount is built. Fits to the fuselage nice and neatly. Cut a hole out to put the wires through to the ESC. Also adds a little bit of airflow into the model. You can see that now, should I need to loosen the motor or replace the motor, I can access the holes through the battery hatch with the Allen key, which works quite neatly. I won't fit it, but you can see that when that goes up against, when the cowling's on, if I push it on a bit firmer, you'll see that there's enough clearance to get the washer and then fit the prop on. The only thing I'm not sure at the moment is whether I can glue the whole cowling on and then I'm able to tighten the prop and nut onto there, or whether I need to split it like I did on the other Spitfire, cut it at the bottom here and then place it over once the propeller's already on. I'll decide that later on. There we go, motor mount all nice and fitted. Having made the motor mount, what I now needed to do is create the spinner. So this was a 3-bladed spinner, sorry, a 2-bladed spinner, but I'm obviously using the 3-bladed prop. So as my other models, I've used some vinyl to create the attachment that will go over there. Then the nut that holds it all on goes inside here. I can use the screws. I had to slightly remount this prop so that it fitted snugly onto the motor. Again, tricky with one hand. Reamed that out gently. That now fits on there. So that will all go in nicely on place. And the nut will tighten all that on. But as you can see, this is where I'm not quite sure whether when I want to put the cowling on, if I put it on, I can't actually get to tighten the nut and hold the prop in place. The motor just spins. What I did last time was slit down the centre, put the prop on, stick this over, tape it, and then it's glued nice and snug to the firewall there. So I'll probably do that again this time. So, quick change of plan. I've actually glued the cowling onto the model, because what I've decided is once I've put the prop on like this, if I can't get a purchase on this part of the motor here to tighten the bolt, or the nut, sorry, what I'll do is I'll make a small slit on the underneath, fold the cowling back so that I can then grab hold of that part of the motor and I'll be able to hold it while I tighten it on. That way I'll be able to spray the model with the cowling on but no prop and no spinner, and I'm pretty sure I'll be able to fit that prop on now. Probably it'll look a lot neater anyway. So that's the cowling on nicely now, so I can now go on to checking the electrics, making sure I've got it spinning the right way round, installing the rest of the electrics, the receiver in, and building up this part. But I'm going to do that tomorrow. Electrics all installed and fitted. Just need to set up the S3X, make sure I get the receiver orientation correct. Got a bit of Velcro in here now because when I put the battery in, the wires pop up and I can't get the hatch on properly, so I'll need to Velcro it tight, keep it all neat and tidy, and then the hatch fits on quite nicely. So now I'm just going to fit the rest of the stringers on, finish the cockpit, cover it. Need to put in the wing fairings as well. Try and tidy this up a little bit, might try a little bit of filler. And then yeah, ready to paint. Okay, those are the final stringers put on. I put this little block here because this stringer had nothing to wedge into, so I just wanted to make sure it stayed rigid. I've put the fairings on both sides, relatively even, which is good. So what I now need to do is go around, tissue cover it, tissue cover over the foam there just to give it a smoother edge, same around there, smooth it all off, fill in any gaps, fill in the back hole there, and then should be ready for the undercoat, the primer. Okay, as you can see, construction is complete. Finished the decking, the turtle deck now, that's all been filled in. Spin it around, that side too. Also the wing roots, all the coverings done. Nice and neat. Underneath where the wing joins, that's all finished. All the gaps have been filled with tissue. It's all been doped up and sprayed like I did on the earlier video. So that's all now ready to go for the undercoat. So I'm going to go and prime it grey. Leave that until tomorrow and then I'll be able to start painting it in the nice camouflage colours. Here we go, all primed up. I always get more excited when it's had this done because it just starts to look more complete. So a nice coating. Everything seems to have tidied up well. You get the idea now with the extra cooler. The fact that the scoop's longer, stands out a bit more. So yeah, I'll connect the push rods once I finish painting it, put the decals on and varnished it all. Canopy is obviously just there like that for now. That's all ready on the cone. So yeah, all looking good, ready for the spray painting, which I'll give a good 12-hour, 24 hours gap, so spray painting after tomorrow. medium sea grey paint has been put on the underside now. It took a little bit longer than I'd hoped because I couldn't get the mix correct with the thinner, but eventually got there, and actually it's quite a nice contrast with the primer. So now it's time to put on the RAF dark green on the top surfaces, so I just need to mask off a few bits and also mark up where I think I want to have the camouflage green. Okay, because this isn't a perfect scale model, I'm not going to worry too much about where the camo is exactly, but I've penciled it on using photos of the actual aeroplane just to get an idea. So now I'm just going to fill in the green, see how that looks. I can always make it bigger or smaller once I've done it with the grey, and then I can touch it up as required. You will notice I've sprayed all this wing green. It's because when I did this part green, that's actually meant to be grey. There should have been 3 green parts so that linked in and then came to the wing leading edge. So I sprayed it all green, and then I'll change it back to grey once it's done. But at least that first coat of green's gone on better than when I did the light grey before. So I'll let all that dry and then look to do a second coat. I've rectified the wing mistake here. As you can see now what I meant by I wanted the grey there and the green on these 3 spaces. I've done a second coat in both the grey and the green now. A lot happy with it. It's a much smoother finish. I do like the live colour paints for that reason. So now I'm going to remove the masking for the leading edge, which will be yellow on both sides. Then obviously the masking here for the duck egg blue stripe around the fuselage. I've painted the canopies the appropriate colours. I'll need to do the exhaust manifolds, and then obviously I need to do the black and the green, cockpit green inside, and then it'll be almost pretty much finished paint wise. So very happy with how it's turned out, and I think all being well as well, I didn't get any green or grey on the underside spray as well, which is good. So yeah, so far so good. Masking at the rear hasn't gone brilliantly, similarly at the front, so what I'll do is I'll use the brush and just hand paint the lines a little bit straighter. I have done in the past used the airbrush. I'll see how this goes just using the brush to start with. The leading edges though, oh well, yeah, there they are, haven't been too bad actually, so I'm happy with how they've turned out, so they'll be ready for yellow. I'll remove the tail band masking tape once I've painted and tidied up this back line here. So whilst the weather might be rubbish outside, the upside is it means you can get on with doing a build inside. I've hand painted excuse me, the ring, done the leading edge yellow stripes, done the exhaust manifolds, done underneath with the scoops and radiators, done the canopy, cockpits, taken the original copy from the model kit, photocopied it, stuck it in the back for the second seat. It's starting to look a lot better now. I think the colours have come out really nicely, so I'm very happy with that. So I shall now be moving on to doing the decals. Okay, it's time to do the decals. On the previous models I've made the decals out of tissue paper, so created them on Word, then printed them on my inkjet printer onto white tissue paper. That works quite nicely. It kind of gives it an old look. The only trouble is the colours aren't as sharp as the model that I'm trying to create, and because it is a new aeroplane and is looked after very well, I want the colours to be a lot brighter than these ones. So this time I'm going to be using the water slide decals. For the water slide decals, I've ordered this product off Amazon. I've used it in the past on my smaller models. This one is white. The reason I've used white is because if I just use the clear, which is easy to cut out, that's only really any good for black, and obviously there's white within the roundels, etc. And my inkjet printer doesn't print white, so I'm having to use this one. I've already designed, as I said already, designed the decals on Word, printed them on paper, made sure they're approximately the right size. Well, not approximately, I made them the right size. I then printed onto the white decal paper. It's glossy paper. Make sure you get the settings correct and do it in the best print. This is the result. And when you compare it to the colour of the tissue paper, you can see why I wanted to do that. It's just so much brighter and clearer. Once the ink's dry, so probably 5, 10, 15 minutes, however long you've got really, it depends how much of a rush you're in, it's time to seal the ink onto the paper. So to do that you use an acrylic varnish. For me, I've used a Humbrol acrylic, and this is what I also use to cover the model when it's completed. Make sure that you give the decal paper a couple of coatings, getting it nice and even all over the decals themselves. Top tip that I learned, probably not an issue for a lot of people, but here in the UK it can be quite cold, and because I'm not allowed to spray in the house when I'm using the tinned spray, I did this in the garage, and it's probably below 10 degrees, and as a result on some of the decals it looks a bit bubbly. I don't know if we can see that on there, probably not. So what I've had to do is I've printed out a couple more. Well, on the other sheet I took it into the conservatory, it was much warmer, sprayed in there, and it came out a lot smoother. Obviously once you've sprayed the decals, sealed the ink in, it's time to cut them out, and then this is what they look like. So nice and bright. I mean, that compared to the old Spitfire, if I hold it up here, yeah, look at that for difference. So that's what I wanted. I wanted something nice and bright to go on the nice and bright model that I've got. One issue when cutting out along the colour, sometimes the ink will run, so that's why you need to make sure you give it a good coat of varnish and allow it a long time to dry. On the instructions for the paper it says to give 2 or 3 millimeters around the edge. Obviously if you do that you've then got a white outline. Now depending what colour you're putting these onto, that could work okay because you could actually hand paint around it, but I've decided I'm going to try and take it right up to the edge. It's worked in the past, so now that's what I'm going to go and do. Okay, applying the decals. This is the decal that I'm going to do first on the underwing. It's going to decide exactly where it's going to go. Roughly there, I reckon, will be about right. Slightly smaller than the one that's going to go on top, but from what I remember it's going to be in line with the red gun tape there. So first thing, I've got my timer for 3 minutes. It's recommended 2.5 to 3 minutes to leave this to soak. What you don't want to do is try and take it off early, and as you try and slide the decal off, the paper just rips or whatever else, and then you've got to reprint them and become a costly mistake at about, it's just under £1 a sheet at the moment. So what I'm going to do now is put it in the water and let it soak for 3 minutes. I put it in upside down because it always curls up and I don't want any of the decal coming out of the water. Okay, it's in there, and then start the timer. Hold it down just for a little bit while the paper absorbs the water, and hopefully that will then activate the glue and release it underneath. I have a little towel just to dry my fingers while that's doing. So another top tip as well, whilst you're waiting for this to get ready to come off the paper, is it's worth wetting the surface where you're going to apply it. So again, just a bit of water, not too much. You can see that the waterproofing from the paint's doing a good job. So yeah, roughly that's where I want it to do. Just gives the water slide decal something to sit on so that you can move it around till you get it in the position that you're happy with. So yeah, just do that. Okay, we'll fast forward. Okay, coming up to 3 minutes. Just going to turn the decal over. Not too bad, but it feels like it's ready to come off, so that's good. So carefully take it out of the water. You want to position yourself or the slide so that you want to slide it off gently. You want to force it roughly in the right position, and then just slowly ease it off the backing paper. I do find the bigger the decals, the more risk there is of them tearing if you're not careful. Slide it off nice and gently. Because you've got the water on, hopefully, yeah, there you go, we can move it just, but not much. So you have to position it, so sometimes you end up putting it where it sticks. So always try and get the best line up you can. Then with a bit of paper tissue is what I use. Try and take off any excess water. Again, try not to let it stick to the decal because it may pull the decal off. And then just gently from the inside out, push the water out under the decal so that it sits nicely on the model. You can see this has worked out really well. There's been no bleeding of the colour, there's no white line around the edge, and the red hasn't bled into the white either, so I've been lucky with this one, or obviously I coated it correctly. So now the challenge will be to make sure that I put the other one on the other side in exactly the same place. But there we go, homemade water slide decals, much brighter than the tissue ones, and I think just makes it look a lot better. So there we go, one nicely applied water slide decal, much brighter than the tissue paper, and as I say, I think I was lucky on that one. I do find the bigger the decal, the more risk there is of it tearing when applying it, but that's gone on really nicely. Just try and get you so you can see that. Oh, the camera's trying to follow me. But there you go, I'm really happy with that. So now I need to get on and do the other side and then apply all the other decals. Hopefully they'll all go on as neat as that. Just while the next decal is soaking, obviously I've made some progress, looking good. On here, obviously I can't always work out the right colour because I can't print these small bits in white. I've had to do it with the background, so I use the RGB colour for the olive green and the grey and try and match it as close as possible, but as you can tell there is some slight difference. Same on the grey on the other side. And also I mentioned earlier that sometimes you get the white line. So what I'm going to have to do on these two decals, so this one and the other side, is using the actual paint and a brush. I'll just go around them and try and cover up as much of the incorrect green and just try and blend it in a little bit more. It won't be perfect, but it should be better. Again, interestingly with the black, for some reason, I've got a slight red outline on both of these decals, which is slightly annoying. But from a distance you can't really tell, so happy days, but that looks okay. So yeah, there we go. To be honest, the lettering is the hardest piece to do, so I've cut it out as best I can. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. The challenge is to get this on without it twisting or warping, so I now need to apply it onto here. The H overlaps on the PV202, which is fine, and it's just making sure that all three are in line, so fingers crossed. One thing I am happy with though is when I was doing these, the colour match isn't that far off the sky blue, so very happy with that. The original RGB colour was a bit darker, so I lightened it, and yeah, once it's compared to the model, looks pretty good. One thing I forgot to say is before applying the decals I did some gloss varnish just to give it a smoother surface to apply it to. After 1 hour 45 of applying decals, that's why I'm happy. This is the end result. They've all gone on well actually. There's quite a few minor imperfections, but got all the decals on the sides. Just go around. Oh, as I mentioned, I said I was going to paint, so I've touched up the decal there just to try and blend it in a bit more. It's a shame that the grey isn't, is a bit too stand out, but the green's blended in quite nicely. I'm going to take the model round. It's much better on this side where it's grey, green, a bit of weird yellowing on the white there for some reason. Again, the decals have gone on nicely all over, and obviously you saw me put the underside on. There's the one, and there's the other. So what I'm going to do now is leave this to dry properly overnight. Then I'm going to cover the whole fuselage, probably in a gloss varnish, just to give it that nice shine that the real aircraft has. Then I can finally peel off the tape from the front canopy. I'll then set up the push rods on the underneath of the ailerons, set up the receiver, glue both canopies on, and then should be ready for the test flight. Obviously I'll need to put the motor on as well. Sorry, not the motor, the prop and the spinner. And then hopefully we'll get round to doing a test flight. Right, so part 4 is coming to conclusion. Since part 3 I've had over 410 subscribers now, so that's brilliant in total. I was after 400, so thank you very much to all of you that have subscribed recently. Yeah, I've converted the Guillow's 403 laser cut Spitfire, early Spitfire Mark 1, Mark 2 to the Mark 9 trainer that I had the privilege of flying in last year. I'm very pleased with how it's come out. The conversion of the tail, the elevator, adding in the second canopy, and that is actually me from a photo from when I was in the real aeroplane. I've done the decals using waterslide decal paper, much clearer. I've added in the second radiator, extended the air scoop there at the front, so those are all the little modifications I've made. It's all set up now, ready to go. Oh yeah, I did these 6 exhaust manifolds per side as well. So now it will just be down to the maiden flight. So hopefully in the next month or so, depending on the weather and work and all the other bits, I'll get to do the maiden of this Spitfire on, obviously, and those of you that are aware, I need to do the Hurricane and the ME-109 too. So again, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it really useful. I'm going to do a little bit of a picture montage of what it looks like outside, just so you can appreciate it, or I appreciate it, so you can appreciate it a little bit more and see what she finally looks like. Again, if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe and like. Thanks very much.